Thunder's proud spirit shattered under the cruel whip of his new owner, his once gleaming coat now streaked with blood and terror. With his last reserves of strength, the aging champion smashed through the locked gate in the dead of night, his heart fixed on one impossible goal: to find his way back to the boy who had loved him when no one else would. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The Valmont estate was the jewel of the countryside, its white columns and manicured lawns a testament to the wealth and power of Esteban Valmont. From the sprawling mansion to the perfectly maintained stables, everything about the property announced to the world that its owner was a man of means, a man who only accepted the very best. Esteban stood on his porch now, surveying his domain with cold, calculating eyes. His three-piece suit, tailored to perfection, did not show a single wrinkle despite the summer heat that caused beads of sweat to form on the foreheads of his workers. Inside the main stable, 16 thoroughbreds stood in pristine stalls, each worth more than what most of his employees would earn in a decade. But there was one stall, positioned at the far end, that held Esteban's particular interest today. He strode purposefully toward it, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished concrete floor. "Mr. Reynolds," Esteban called out, his voice echoing through the stable. "Is everything prepared?" The stable manager appeared instantly, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Yes, sir. The transport is scheduled for noon." Esteban nodded, stopping in front of the last stall. Inside stood Thunder, a magnificent chestnut stallion with a black mane that once had been the pride of the Valmont racing stables. At 17 years old, the horse's coat still gleamed in the light that filtered through the windows, but there was a slight stiffness to his movements now, a subtle sign of the arthritis that had begun to take hold. "And the buyer has transferred the funds?" Esteban asked, not bothering to look at the manager as he studied the horse with detached interest. "Yes, sir. The full amount is agreed." Esteban's lips curved into a thin smile. "Excellent." He reached out to pat Thunder's neck, but there was no affection in the gesture, merely the satisfaction of a businessman who had made a profitable transaction. Thunder turned his head toward Esteban, his large, intelligent eyes seeming to question what was happening. For a moment, something like recognition flickered across the horse's gaze, not for Esteban, but for what his presence represented: change. "Sir," Reynolds ventured hesitantly, "if I may, Thunder has been with us for 15 years. He's won more races than any other horse in your stables. Are you certain?" "I don't pay you to question my business decisions, Reynolds," Esteban cut him off, his voice sharp as a blade. "Thunder's racing days are over. He's taking up valuable space that could house a champion. Sentiment has no place in this business." Reynolds fell silent, knowing better than to argue. It wasn't his place, after all. Esteban Valmont had built his fortune by making cold, calculated decisions, unburdened by emotion or attachment. It was why his business empire continued to grow while others faltered. What neither man noticed was the figure watching from the shadows of the hayloft above, a young man of about 20, his face a mask of quiet anguish. Miguel had worked at the Valmont estate since he was 13, starting as a stable boy and working his way up to assistant trainer. He had been there the day Thunder arrived, a spirited 2-year-old with fire in his eyes and thunder in his hooves, thus earning his name. Miguel remembered those early mornings when he would slip into the stables before anyone else arrived, just to spend time with Thunder. He had taught the horse tricks, fed him apples smuggled from the kitchen, and whispered his dreams into those attentive ears. When Thunder raced, it was Miguel who prepared him, who knew exactly how to calm his pre-race jitters. And when Thunder won, which he did, time and again, it was Miguel who celebrated with him first, long before Esteban appeared for the photographs and the trophies. But as Thunder aged and his racing career came to its inevitable conclusion, Esteban's interest in the horse had waned. To Miguel's horror, he had overheard the conversation about the sale just days ago. Thunder was being sold to Ferdinand Martinez, a notorious businessman known for his harsh treatment of horses. Martinez didn't care about Thunder's well-being. He only wanted the prestige of owning a former champion for his collection. "The trailer will be here in an hour," Esteban said, checking his watch. "Make sure he's ready." With that, he turned and walked away, his mind already on his next meeting. Reynolds sighed, approaching Thunder's stall with regret written across his weathered face. "I'm sorry, old boy," he murmured, stroking the horse's muzzle. "If it were up to me." From his hiding place, Miguel watched Reynolds lead Thunder out of his stall for what would be the last time. The stable manager was gentle, taking his time, allowing Thunder to walk at his own pace. Miguel's chest tightened as he observed the ritual, knowing that such kindness would not be part of Thunder's life at the Martinez estate. He had heard the rumors. Horses kept in cramped conditions, underfed, overworked, all for the sake of Martinez's ego. The man was not a horseman. He was a collector who displayed his acquisitions without understanding or respecting them. The thought of Thunder in such hands was unbearable. As Reynolds led Thunder outside to prepare him for transport, Miguel slipped down from the hayloft, his mind racing. He had to do something. He couldn't let Thunder go to Martinez. But what could he do? He was just a stable hand, with no money, no power, nothing to offer against the wealth and influence of Esteban Valmont. "Miguel," a voice called from the entrance of the stable. It was Anna, the cook's daughter, her face flushed from running. "They're loading Thunder onto the trailer. You have to come now if you want to say goodbye." Miguel followed her outside, where the transport trailer was parked, its ramp lowered. Reynolds was guiding Thunder toward it, speaking softly to the horse, who seemed to sense that something was wrong. Thunder's ears were flattened against his head, his steps hesitant. "Can I?" Miguel asked Reynolds, gesturing toward Thunder. The stable manager nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Make it quick. Mr. Valmont wants him gone before lunch." Miguel approached Thunder, placing his hand on the horse's neck. He leaned in close, his words meant only for those velvety ears. "I won't forget you," he whispered. "And somehow, I'll find a way to make this right." Thunder nudged Miguel's chest with his nose, a gesture so familiar it made Miguel's eyes sting with unshed tears. For 15 years, this horse had been his closest friend, his confidant, his partner, and now he was being taken away, sold like an outdated piece of equipment. As Reynolds gently urged Thunder up the ramp and into the trailer, Miguel made a silent promise. This would not be the end of their story. Somehow, he would find a way to save Thunder from his fate, no matter what it took. The journey to the Martinez estate was long and uncomfortable. Thunder stood uneasily in the trailer. His powerful legs braced against the swaying motion as they traveled over hills and winding roads. Every jolt sent pain shooting through his arthritic joints, but there was nowhere for him to lie down, nowhere to escape the discomfort. The trailer was dark, hot, and smelled of fear, his own and that of countless animals who had traveled this route before him. When the trailer finally came to a stop, Thunder's coat was slick with sweat, his breathing labored. The ramp lowered with a harsh metallic clang, and unfamiliar hands reached for his lead rope. The man who grasped it wasn't gentle like Reynolds or Miguel. He yanked Thunder forward impatiently, unconcerned with the horse's reluctance or discomfort. "Come on, you expensive piece of horsehide," the handler muttered. "The boss wants to see his new trophy." Thunder was led through iron gates into a property that, at first glance, appeared impressive. The Martinez estate boasted sprawling grounds and a mansion that rivaled the Valmont estate in size, though it lacked the same care and attention to detail. Where Valmont's gardens were meticulously maintained, Martinez's were overgrown in places, neglected in others. It was the estate of a man who purchased beauty, but didn't nurture it. The stables came into view, a large, imposing structure with high stone walls and few windows. It looked more like a prison than a home for horses, and Thunder balked at the entrance, some instinct warning him of what lay inside. The handler cursed and jerked the rope harder, forcing Thunder forward. Inside, the stables were dim and airless. The stalls were smaller than what Thunder was accustomed to, with dirty straw that hadn't been changed in days. The other horses watched Thunder's arrival with dull eyes, their once proud spirits broken by neglect and mistreatment. Some bore visible signs of abuse, scarred flanks, patches of missing hair, ribs visible beneath their dull coats. "Put him in stall 3, a voice commanded from the entrance. Ferdinand Martinez strode in, dressed in an expensive suit similar to Esteban's, but where Esteban carried himself with cold precision, Martinez exuded a kind of reckless cruelty. His eyes were hard, his mouth a thin line of perpetual dissatisfaction. He approached Thunder with the air of a man inspecting a new acquisition rather than greeting a living being. "So this is the great Thunder," Martinez said, circling the horse with calculating eyes. 17 race victories, over 2 million in winnings, and now mine." He reached out to touch Thunder's flank, his fingers pressing too hard against the horse's coat. "Not as impressive as I expected. Valmont assured me he was in top condition." "He's old, sir," the handler said. 17 is past prime for a thoroughbred." Martinez waved a dismissive hand. "I don't need him to race. I need him to impress my guests. Clean him up. I'm hosting a dinner party tomorrow night, and I want him displayed in the front paddock. My guests should see what their host can afford." With that, Martinez left, his interest in Thunder already waning now that ownership had been established. The handler led Thunder to stall 3 and removed his halter with rough efficiency before slamming the stall door shut. Thunder stood motionless in his new prison, the unfamiliar surroundings and harsh treatment leaving him disoriented. The stall was barely large enough for him to turn around in, the ground covered with thin, soiled straw that did little to cushion his aching joints. A half-empty bucket of stagnant water sat in one corner, and a meager portion of poor-quality hay in the other. This was to be his life now, a far cry from the comfortable stall, fresh bedding, and premium feed he had known at the Valmont estate. As night fell, the temperature in the stable dropped, and Thunder shivered, missing the warm blanket Miguel always draped over him on cool evenings. The sounds were different too. No gentle murmuring of stable hands, no radio playing softly in the background. Instead, there were occasional harsh shouts, the crack of a whip, and the distressed whinnies of horses unused to kindness. Thunder didn't sleep that night. His body ached from the journey and his new accommodations, but worse was the confusion and grief that filled his heart. Where was Miguel? Where were the familiar sights and smells of the home he had known for 15 years? In his own way, Thunder mourned, standing with his head low, occasionally pawing at the ground in distress. The next morning brought no comfort. The handlers arrived late, distributing small amounts of feed with cursory attention. They worked quickly, roughly, with none of the care or affection Thunder had grown accustomed to. When it came time to prepare him for Martinez's dinner party, they brushed him hurriedly, missing many spots, and used harsh commands instead of patient guidance. They led him to the front paddock, a small enclosure near the mansion's entrance, where he was tied to a post with barely enough rope to move his head. There he would stand for hours as a living display of Martinez's wealth, a conversation piece for guests to admire from a distance. "Don't even think about making a fuss," one handler warned, slapping Thunder's flank. "The boss doesn't tolerate disobedience. Ask any of the others." As the sun beat down on him without shade, as thirst parched his throat with no water offered, Thunder began to understand what his life would be like under Martinez's ownership. No longer a valued athlete or beloved companion, he had become a status symbol, an object to be displayed and then forgotten. The dinner guests arrived in expensive cars, pausing briefly to admire the former champion as they entered the mansion. Some took photos, others simply nodded appreciatively at Martinez's latest acquisition. None seemed to notice or care about Thunder's discomfort or the dullness that had begun to creep into his once bright eyes. "Magnificent animal," one guest commented to Martinez, who had come out to greet them. "Must have cost a fortune." Martinez smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. Valmont was desperate to sell. The horse is past its prime, but the name alone was worth the price. "Planning to breed him?" another guest asked. Martinez laughed. "Too old, too expensive to maintain for that. No, he's purely for show. Once the novelty wears off, I'll probably sell him to one of the local riding schools. They're always looking for broken-down thoroughbreds." The casual cruelty of the statement reached Thunder's ears, and though he couldn't understand the words, he sensed their meaning in Martinez's tone. A shudder ran through his body, a premonition of worse days to come. As darkness fell and the party moved inside, Thunder was left alone in the paddock, forgotten. No one came to lead him back to his stall, to provide water for his thirst or food for his hunger. He stood there through the night, muscles trembling with fatigue, unable to lie down due to the short tether. By morning, when a hungover handler finally remembered his existence, Thunder had reached a decision born of desperation and instinct. He would not stay here. Somehow, he would escape this place of cruelty and neglect. Somehow, he would find his way back to kindness, back to Miguel, the only human who had ever truly cared for him. It was an impossible goal, perhaps, but Thunder's spirit had not yet been broken, and in that unbroken spirit lay the seed of his salvation. Thunder's opportunity came 3 days later, on a rain-soaked evening when the handlers were more concerned with staying dry than securing the stables properly. The downpour had started at midday, a relentless torrent that flooded the poorly drained paddocks and turned the Martinez estate into a muddy quagmire. Thunder had been left in his stall without exercise for the 3rd consecutive day, his muscles stiff from inactivity and his spirit sinking lower with each passing hour. The stable was eerily quiet that evening. Martinez was away on business, and most of the staff had retreated to their quarters early, eager to escape the rain, and their employer's absence offered a rare respite from their usual vigilance. Only a single handler remained, a young man new to the job who hurried through his evening duties, carelessly leaving Thunder's stall door improperly latched in his haste. Thunder noticed the mistake immediately. The metal bolt had not slid fully into place, leaving a small gap that widened slightly each time the stable door rattled in the wind. He watched it carefully, ears pricked forward, a spark of the old fire returning to his eyes. Years of training had taught Thunder to stay in his stall unless led out by a handler, but desperation now outweighed obedience. With gentle persistence, Thunder nudged the door with his muzzle, applying steady pressure until the gap widened enough for him to push his head through. One more forceful shove with his shoulder, and the door swung open with a creak that seemed deafening in the quiet stable. Thunder froze, ears swiveling nervously, but the sound of the rain muffled the noise, and no alarm was raised. Freedom beckoned, but Thunder moved cautiously, painfully aware of his aging joints and the punishment that would follow if he were caught. Step by careful step, he made his way down the center aisle of the stable, past the stalls of other horses who watched his escape with a mixture of envy and resignation. None made a sound. It was as if they understood his desperation and silently wished him success. The main stable door was partially open, left ajar by the careless handler who had assumed the horses were all securely locked away. Thunder slipped through the gap, emerging into the rain-soaked night. The deluge had not abated, and within moments his coat was drenched, water streaming down his flanks and dripping from his mane. But the rain was also a blessing. It would wash away his scent, making it harder for anyone to track him come morning. Thunder paused at the edge of the stable yard, uncertain which way to go. The Martinez estate was surrounded by high stone walls with only 2 exits, the main gate at the front, which was guarded day and night, and a smaller service entrance at the rear used by delivery vehicles and staff. Instinct guided Thunder toward the latter, memory of the route they had taken upon his arrival still fresh in his mind. The service gate was unlocked but closed, a simple wooden barrier that would normally be impassable for a horse. But Thunder had not been a champion racer for nothing. Despite his age and the pain in his joints, he summoned the strength and courage that had once carried him to victory after victory. Backing up several paces, he launched forward, gathering speed despite the slippery ground, and cleared the gate in a single, magnificent leap that would have made Miguel proud. Landing heavily on the other side, Thunder felt a sharp pain shoot through his right foreleg. For a moment he stood trembling, afraid he had injured himself beyond recovery at the very start of his journey. But after a few tentative steps, he realized it was merely a strain, painful but not debilitating. He could continue, and continue he must. Thunder had no idea how far he would need to travel to find his way back to Miguel, but he knew it was a considerable distance. The journey to Martinez's estate had taken hours in the trailer, and on foot, weakened by poor treatment and advancing age, it would take far longer. But the alternative, returning to a life of neglect and cruelty, was unthinkable. So Thunder began his journey, guided by nothing more than instinct and the faint memory of scents and landmarks noticed during his transit to this place of misery. The rain continued to fall, turning country roads into muddy tracks and obscuring his vision, but it also provided cover, keeping most humans indoors and unaware of a lone horse making his escape. By dawn, Thunder had put several miles between himself and the Martinez estate. The rain had finally stopped, and the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating a landscape very different from what he had known. Instead of the manicured lawns and carefully tended fields of the Valmont estate, he found himself in rough, open countryside with patches of woodland and small farms scattered across rolling hills. Exhausted, hungry, and thirsty, Thunder paused by a small stream to drink and rest. His coat was caked with mud, his mane tangled with burrs and twigs, and his muscles trembled with fatigue, but in his heart burned a determination that would not be extinguished. He would find Miguel, or die trying. After resting for an hour, Thunder continued his journey, staying away from main roads where possible, instinctively understanding that humans might try to capture him. When he did encounter people, a farmer on a tractor, a family in a car, he retreated into nearby woods or behind hedgerows, waiting until they passed before resuming his trek. As the day wore on, Thunder's pace slowed. The initial burst of energy fueled by his escape had waned, and the reality of his situation began to sink in. He was an aging horse, alone in unfamiliar territory, with no clear path home. Doubt crept in, along with hunger and increasing pain in his joints, especially the foreleg he had strained during his leap over the gate. By late afternoon, Thunder was struggling. Each step was an effort, and he had been forced to stop frequently to rest. The sun was beginning to set, and he had found no shelter, no safe haven for the night. Fear began to mingle with his determination. Fear of predators, of the cold night ahead, of failure. It was then that he caught a scent on the breeze, faint but familiar, the sweet smell of fresh hay and clean straw. Following his nose, Thunder crested a small hill and saw below him a modest farm, with a small stable and a fenced paddock where several horses grazed peacefully. It wasn't the Valmont estate, it wasn't home, but it was a place of horses, and perhaps there he might find temporary sanctuary. Approaching cautiously, Thunder stayed at the edge of the property, observing the farm and its inhabitants from a distance. An elderly couple moved about the yard, their movements slow but purposeful, their treatment of the animals gentle and respectful. They reminded Thunder of old Reynolds, the stable manager at Valmont, who had always treated him with kindness. As darkness fell, Thunder made his decision. He could go no further tonight, and this farm seemed safe, its occupants kind. Moving quietly, he approached the fence of the paddock, where the other horses were now being led into the small stable for the night. One by one, they disappeared inside, leaving the paddock empty and its gate open, an invitation Thunder could not refuse. The elderly farmer was just about to close the paddock gate when he noticed Thunder standing there, a bedraggled, exhausted figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. The man froze, then slowly extended his hand, speaking in a gentle voice that carried across the distance between them. "Hello there," he said softly. "Where did you come from, old fellow?" Thunder stood motionless, assessing the elderly man who approached him with careful, measured steps. Years of experience had taught the horse to read humans, their intentions, their temperaments, the threat or kindness they might offer. This man moved like someone who understood horses, his hand extended palm up, his voice a gentle murmur of reassurance. "Easy now," the farmer said. "You're safe here." Thunder's instinct was to flee, to continue his desperate journey, but exhaustion and hunger held him in place. The smell of fresh hay from the nearby stable was too tempting to resist, and something in the old man's eyes reminded him of the gentleness he had known with Miguel. Slowly, cautiously, Thunder lowered his head and allowed the farmer to touch his muzzle. "Martha," the man called over his shoulder, never taking his eyes off Thunder. "Come see what's wandered onto our property." An elderly woman emerged from the small farmhouse, wiping her hands on her apron as she crossed the yard. Her eyes widened at the sight of Thunder. "Goodness, Henry, where did he come from?" "Don't know," Henry replied, carefully examining Thunder's condition. "But he's in a bad way. Looks like he's been on his own for a while. And look here." He pointed to Thunder's right foreleg, where the strain from his leap over the gate had caused swelling. "He's injured." Martha approached slowly, her expression softening as she took in Thunder's bedraggled state. "Poor thing. He's half-starved too." She reached out to stroke his neck, her touch as gentle as her husband's. "We should bring him in, give him some food and water." Henry nodded, producing a length of rope from his pocket which he fashioned into a makeshift halter. Thunder accepted it without resistance, too exhausted to do otherwise, and followed the couple to their modest stable where 3 other horses, all much older and calmer than those at either the Valmont or Martinez estates, watched curiously from their stalls. "We've got one empty stall," Henry said, leading Thunder inside. "It's not much, but it's dry and warm." The stall was indeed modest compared to what Thunder had known at the Valmont estate, but it was clean, with fresh straw and a water bucket free of algae, luxuries compared to his accommodations at Martinez's stable. Thunder entered willingly, relief washing over him as his weary legs finally had a chance to rest. Martha returned moments later with a bucket of oats and a flake of sweet-smelling hay. "Here you go," she said, placing them within easy reach. "Eat slowly now. You don't want to make yourself sick." Thunder needed no encouragement. He ate gratefully, savoring each mouthful of the simple but clean food. As he ate, Henry and Martha watched him with concerned expressions. "He's a thoroughbred," Henry observed. "Look at his conformation, even in this state, and there's something about him. He's been somebody's prized horse." "Do you think he's escaped from somewhere?" Martha asked. Henry nodded. "Has to have. A horse like this doesn't just wander wild. Someone owns him, and given his condition, I'd wager they haven't been treating him right." "Should we report him found?" Martha's voice was hesitant. Like her husband, she had noticed the signs of neglect in Thunder's condition. Henry stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Let's wait a day or two. Give him a chance to rest. See to that leg. If someone's looking for him, they'll put the word out. If not—" He left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. If no one claimed Thunder, perhaps he could stay with them. That night, Thunder slept deeply for the first time since leaving the Valmont estate. The stable was quiet and peaceful, the other horses calm presences that soothed his frayed nerves. His body still ached, but the clean straw cushioned his joints, and the simple knowledge that he was safe, at least for the moment, allowed him to surrender to exhaustion. For the next 3 days, Henry and Martha cared for Thunder with a kindness that reminded him of his early years with Miguel. They bathed him, carefully untangling his mane and tail, and applied a poultice to his strained foreleg. They fed him well, though not too richly, understanding that his starved body needed to readjust gradually to proper nutrition. Thunder began to regain some of his former spirit. His eyes brightened, his coat regained a hint of its old luster, and he greeted Henry and Martha with soft nickering when they entered the stable. In another life, he might have been content to stay with them, to live out his remaining years in this peaceful place. But memories of Miguel tugged at his heart, an invisible tether pulling him toward the only human who had ever truly known him, who had shared his triumphs and comforted his defeats. And so, even as he accepted Henry and Martha's care, Thunder watched the open stable door, calculating, waiting for the moment when he must continue his journey. That moment came on the 4th day, when a truck bearing the Martinez crest pulled up to the farm. Thunder saw it from his stall, recognizing the insignia that had been emblazoned on the gate he had leaped over to escape. His muscles tensed, his ears flattened against his head in fear and defiance. From the house he could hear voices, Henry's, Martha's, and a third harsher voice that Thunder recognized as belonging to one of Martinez's handlers. They were talking about him. He could sense it in the way Henry glanced toward the stable, his expression troubled. "Yes, he's here," Henry was saying. "Wandered in a few days ago. We've been caring for him." The handler's response was too low to hear, but his aggressive stance spoke volumes. Henry's back straightened, his normally gentle demeanor hardening. "I understand he's valuable property, but he was in terrible condition when he arrived. If Mr. Martinez wants him back, I'd like to know why the horse was so neglected." More words were exchanged, voices rising, Martha stepping between the men with placating gestures. Thunder knew what would happen next. The handler would come for him, would drag him back to that place of misery and neglect. His window of opportunity was closing rapidly. With a sudden surge of determination, Thunder pushed against his stall door. Henry, kind but trusting, had not latched it securely, assuming the exhausted horse would stay put. The door swung open easily, and Thunder stepped out into the center aisle of the stable. The other horses watched silently as he made his way to the open stable door, his movements deliberate, focused. Outside, the argument continued, all eyes on the confrontation rather than on the stable. Thunder paused at the threshold, looking back at the place that had offered him brief sanctuary. In his own way, he felt gratitude toward Henry and Martha, regret at leaving without farewell. But the sight of the Martinez truck steeled his resolve. With newfound strength born of decent food and rest, Thunder slipped out of the stable and around the side of the building, keeping out of sight of the arguing humans. The farm's back field offered a clear path to the woods beyond, and from there he could continue his journey. Heart-pounding, muscles tense with anticipation, Thunder broke into a trot, then a canter, ignoring the twinge in his healing foreleg. Behind him, he heard a shout of alarm. He had been spotted, but it was too late. He was already at the edge of the woods, the dense trees offering cover and concealment. The sound of pursuit faded as Thunder navigated the woodland, his instincts guiding him through the unfamiliar terrain. He was on the move again, his rest cut short but his strength partially restored. And this time, he had a clearer sense of direction. During his stay at the farm, he had overheard Henry mention the Valmont estate, had seen him point toward the distant hills that Thunder now knew he must cross. Miguel was out there somewhere, and Thunder would find him, no matter the obstacles that lay ahead. The woodland provided Thunder with temporary shelter, but it was no place for a horse accustomed to open pastures and groomed paddocks. Branches scratched at his flanks, roots threatened to trip his hooves, and the dense canopy blocked much of the sunlight, leaving him to navigate in a perpetual twilight. Still, he pressed on, driven by the desperate need to put distance between himself and Martinez's men. Thunder traveled through the remainder of the day and into the evening, stopping only when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. He found a small clearing where a stream trickled between moss-covered rocks, providing clean water and a patch of grass to graze. His leg throbbed with renewed pain, the strain aggravated by his hasty departure from Henry and Martha's farm, but the injury wasn't severe enough to halt his progress entirely. As night fell, Thunder remained alert, his senses heightened by unfamiliar forest sounds, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of nocturnal creatures in the underbrush, the whisper of wind through the trees. He dozed intermittently, never fully surrendering to sleep, his ears constantly swiveling to catch any sign of pursuit. Dawn found him stiff but determined. Thunder drank deeply from the stream, grazed what little grass was available, and resumed his journey, guided by an internal compass that seemed to pull him inexorably toward Miguel. By midday, the woods began to thin, giving way to rolling farmland interspersed with country roads. Thunder approached this transition with caution. Open ground meant better footing and faster travel, but also greater visibility. Humans would notice a lone thoroughbred, and questions would be asked. The Martinez estate was influential in these parts. Word of a missing valuable horse would have spread. Keeping to hedgerows and the margins of fields, Thunder advanced cautiously, freezing into stillness whenever a vehicle passed or farm workers appeared in the distance. His coat, once a gleaming chestnut that announced his pedigree, was now dulled by dust and marred by scratches, providing a kind of camouflage that helped him blend into the rural landscape. Midway through the afternoon, Thunder crested a hill and paused, his heart quickening at the view before him. In the far distance, barely visible through a heat haze, rose the distinctive silhouette of the Valmont estate's main house. He was still many miles away, but the sight infused him with renewed purpose. Somewhere in that direction was Miguel, and with Miguel, safety. Thunder's momentary elation was interrupted by the rumble of an approaching vehicle. He retreated quickly into a nearby copse of trees, watching as a truck bearing the Martinez insignia rolled past on the country road below. The search for him continued then. Martinez was not a man to accept the loss of his property easily, especially property acquired as a status symbol. When the truck had disappeared from view, Thunder emerged cautiously and resumed his journey, now even more vigilant. He stayed away from roads, choosing instead to follow the contours of the land, moving from one patch of cover to the next. Progress was slow but steady, each step bringing him closer to his goal. As evening approached once more, Thunder faced a new challenge, a broad river that cut across his path, its waters swift and deep. In his prime, he might have swum across without hesitation, but now, weakened by age and his recent ordeal, the prospect was daunting. Yet there was no bridge in sight, and backtracking would mean precious time lost. Thunder paced along the riverbank, searching for a crossing point. Eventually, he found a section where the river widened and grew shallower, with a series of partially submerged rocks, creating a natural, if precarious, stepping-stone path. It was risky, especially with his injured leg, but the alternative, remaining on the wrong side of the river while Martinez's men closed in, was worse. Gathering his courage, Thunder stepped into the water, testing the first stone with careful precision. It held firm beneath his weight, encouraging him to continue. Stone by stone, he made his way across, his legs trembling with the effort of maintaining balance as the current pushed against him. Halfway across, his injured foreleg slipped, and for a heart-stopping moment he nearly fell into the rushing water. But years of training and an indomitable will allowed him to recover, regaining his footing and completing the crossing with the last of his strength. On the far bank, Thunder collapsed, his sides heaving, his body quivering with exhaustion. He had made it across, but at a cost. His foreleg throbbed mercilessly, and he knew he could go no further that day. Finding a sheltered spot beneath a willow tree, he lowered himself carefully to the ground, something he rarely did outside the safety of a stable. But necessity overrode habit, and soon he was stretched out on the cool grass, his body demanding rest that could no longer be denied. Thunder slept deeply that night, his dreams filled with memories of better days, galloping freely in the Valmont paddocks, the wind in his mane, Miguel's voice, low and comforting in his ear before a race, the sweet taste of carrots offered as a reward for a job well done. These memories sustained him, providing a beacon toward which he struggled, a promise of what might be again if only he could complete his journey. Morning brought renewed pain but also determination. Thunder rose slowly, testing his injured leg. It bore his weight, though not without protest. He could continue, albeit at a slower pace. He drank from the river, grazed on the lush riverside grass, and set off once more, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon where the Valmont estate lay. The day that followed was perhaps the most challenging yet. The terrain grew more difficult, with steep hills that taxed his endurance and rocky patches that threatened his footing. The weather turned against him as well, a sudden summer storm bringing lashing rain and wind that seemed determined to push him back the way he had come. But Thunder pressed on, one painful step after another, guided by a love stronger than fear, a loyalty deeper than instinct. By late afternoon, the storm had passed and Thunder found himself on familiar ground at last. He had reached the outer boundaries of the Valmont estate, recognizing landmarks he had seen countless times during his years there. A distinctive oak tree, a particular bend in the road, a stone wall he had often galloped alongside during training sessions. Home was close now, so close he could almost smell the familiar scents of the Valmont stables. But caution was still necessary. If Esteban discovered him, he might simply be sold again, perhaps to someone even worse than Martinez. No, Thunder needed to find Miguel directly, to bypass the main estate and locate the small cottage where his young friend lived on the edge of the Valmont property. With renewed vigor despite his exhaustion, Thunder skirted the main house and its surrounding buildings, keeping to the shelter of trees and hedges. As twilight descended, he approached the cluster of worker cottages where Miguel and other staff lived. His senses were on high alert, searching for any sign of his friend among the figures moving between the buildings in the gathering dusk. And then, suddenly, he caught a scent on the breeze, a familiar mixture of soap, leather, and the peppermints Miguel always carried in his pockets to share with his equine friends. Thunder's heart leaped in his chest, his ears pricked forward eagerly. He was close, so close to the one person who could protect him, who would understand his desperate flight and the love that had driven him across miles of unknown territory. With the last of his strength, Thunder moved toward that beloved scent, hoping against hope that the reunion he had dreamed of was finally within reach. Miguel sat on the small porch of his cottage, hands clasped tightly around a mug of cooling coffee. He hadn't slept well since Thunder's departure, his dreams haunted by images of the horse suffering under Martinez's care. Stories of the businessman's treatment of animals were well known among the local stable hands, whispered warnings that now tormented Miguel day and night. The cottage was one of several modest dwellings provided for Valmont estate workers, situated far enough from the main house to offer privacy, but close enough to ensure prompt attendance to duties. Miguel's home was the last in the row, bordered by a small copse of trees that separated the workers' quarters from the estate's eastern pastures. It was a quiet spot, especially in the evenings when most workers retreated indoors after long days of physical labor. As twilight deepened into dusk, Miguel's eyes remained fixed on the middle distance, his thoughts 1,000 miles away. He barely registered the sounds of the estate settling for the night. Distant voices, doors closing, the occasional whinny from the main stables. It was a routine that had once comforted him, but now served only to remind him of Thunder's absence. A movement at the edge of the trees caught his attention, pulling him from his reverie. At first he dismissed it as a deer or perhaps one of the estate's cats hunting for mice. But something about the shape, the silhouette against the darkening sky, made him set down his mug and rise slowly to his feet. "It can't be," he whispered, hardly daring to believe what his eyes were suggesting. The figure moved again, emerging partially from the shelter of the trees, and Miguel's heart nearly stopped. Despite the dim light, despite the distance, he would know that form anywhere. The proud arch of the neck, the distinctive way of carrying the head, the proportions that had made Thunder one of the most recognized thoroughbreds in racing. "Thunder?" Miguel called softly, afraid that speaking the name aloud might shatter what surely must be an illusion born of grief and longing. The horse's ears pricked forward at the sound of Miguel's voice, and a soft nicker carried across the distance between them. It was a sound Miguel had heard thousands of times, a greeting reserved just for him, and it dispelled any doubts. This was no apparition, no trick of the fading light. Miguel was running before he made the conscious decision to move, his feet carrying him swiftly across the open ground. "Thunder!" he called again, louder this time, heedless of who might hear. Nothing mattered except reaching the horse, confirming with his hands what his eyes and ears were telling him. Thunder limped forward to meet him, his injuries momentarily forgotten in the joy of reunion. When they finally came together, Miguel threw his arms around the horse's neck, burying his face in the tangled mane as tears spilled down his cheeks. Thunder leaned into the embrace, his warm breath tickling Miguel's ear, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. "How?" Miguel whispered, running his hands over Thunder's body, taking in the scratches, the weight loss, the swollen foreleg. "How did you get here? How did you escape?" Of course, Thunder couldn't answer, but his presence told a story more eloquent than words, a tale of determination, of loyalty strong enough to overcome pain and fear, of a bond between horse and human that transcended ownership and property rights. "You came back to me," Miguel said, his voice breaking. "You found your way back." For several minutes they remained locked in their reunion, Miguel murmuring words of comfort and love, Thunder responding with gentle nudges and soft nickers. But gradually, reality began to intrude. Miguel became acutely aware of their exposed position, of the risk they were taking standing in the open where anyone might see them. "We need to get you hidden," he said urgently, glancing toward the main house. "If Esteban or any of his men see you—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Both of them knew what would happen if Thunder were discovered, a return to Martinez, or perhaps an even worse fate if the businessman discovered the horse's escape and subsequent return to Valmont. With gentle urgency, Miguel led Thunder toward his cottage, grateful for the growing darkness that provided some cover. The small shed attached to the back of his home was used for storing gardening tools and personal items, not designed for housing a horse. But it would have to do for now, at least until Miguel could figure out a more permanent solution. "It's not much," he apologized as he cleared a space among the stored items. "Nothing like your old stall, but it's safe, and you'll be with me." Thunder entered the makeshift shelter without hesitation, trusting Miguel implicitly. The space was cramped, the floor hard-packed dirt rather than straw-covered concrete. But after his journey, any shelter was welcome, especially one that held Miguel's scent. Miguel worked quickly to make Thunder as comfortable as possible, laying down an old blanket for bedding, providing a bucket of fresh water, and fashioning a temporary feed trough from a plastic storage bin. He examined Thunder's injuries with gentle hands, his heart aching at each sign of the hardships the horse had endured. "Your poor leg," he murmured, carefully probing the swollen joint. "And these scratches. You've been through rough country, haven't you, boy?" From a cabinet in his cottage, Miguel retrieved a small medical kit, one he had put together over years of working with horses, containing remedies for common ailments and injuries. It wasn't much, nothing like the extensive supplies available in the main stables, but it would have to do. He couldn't risk going to the stable for proper medical supplies. Too many questions would be asked. With tender care, Miguel cleaned Thunder's wounds, applied salve to the scratches, and wrapped the injured foreleg in a supportive bandage. Throughout the treatment, Thunder stood patiently, occasionally nickering softly, as if to reassure Miguel that he was all right, that the pain was a small price to pay for their reunion. "You need food," Miguel said when the medical care was complete. "Wait here. I'll be right back." He slipped out of the shed and into his cottage, returning moments later with several apples, a handful of carrots, and some oats he kept for making bread. It wasn't the specialized feed Thunder was accustomed to, but it would sustain him for now. As Thunder ate hungrily, Miguel sat beside him in the cramped shed, one hand resting on the horse's flank, reluctant to break physical contact even for a moment. His mind raced with the implications of Thunder's return and the challenges that lay ahead. Keeping a horse hidden on the Valmont estate would be nearly impossible. Esteban's oversight was meticulous, his attention to detail legendary. Sooner or later, someone would notice Miguel's unusual behavior, would hear Thunder's movements or vocalizations, would question why the young stable hand was spending so much time at his cottage rather than socializing with the other workers as he usually did. And what of Martinez? By now, the businessman must know of Thunder's escape. Would he connect it to Miguel? Would he suspect that the horse might return to Valmont? The Martinez and Valmont families moved in the same social circles. It wouldn't take much for suspicions to be shared, for searches to be organized. Yet despite these fears, Miguel felt a resolve hardening within him. Thunder had risked everything to return to him, had endured pain and hardship beyond imagining to escape the cruelty of his new owner. Miguel would not, could not, betray that trust. "I'll protect you," he promised, stroking Thunder's neck. "Whatever it takes, I won't let them take you again." Thunder's soft nicker seemed to acknowledge the vow, a promise exchanged between two beings whose bond transcended the usual boundaries between human and animal. Together, they would face whatever came next, their loyalty to each other a shield against the forces that sought to separate them. The first night passed in a blur of vigilance and relief for Miguel. Every few hours, he would slip out of his cottage and into the shed to check on Thunder, bringing fresh water, offering comfort, and listening anxiously for any sounds that might indicate someone approaching. Each time, he found the horse standing quietly, ears pricked forward at Miguel's entrance, eyes gleaming with recognition in the dim light of the small battery-operated lantern Miguel dared to use. By dawn, Miguel had formulated the beginnings of a plan. He couldn't keep Thunder in the cramped shed indefinitely. The horse needed proper care, exercise, and better food than Miguel could smuggle from the kitchen. More importantly, they couldn't remain at Valmont. Esteban's far-reaching influence meant that even if Miguel successfully hid Thunder for a time, discovery was inevitable. They would need to leave, to find a place far from both Valmont and Martinez, where they could start anew. But such an escape required resources that Miguel, with his modest stable-hand salary, simply didn't possess. He had some savings carefully accumulated over years of frugal living, but not enough to transport a horse across country, let alone establish a new life somewhere else. He would need help, and that meant taking a risk, confiding in someone who might betray them. As the estate began to stir with morning activity, Miguel prepared for his regular duties. He couldn't afford to raise suspicions by altering his routine. Before leaving, He made sure Thunder had enough water and feed to last until midday, when Miguel could slip away briefly during lunch to check on him. "Stay quiet," he whispered, stroking Thunder's muzzle. "I'll be back as soon as I can." Thunder's gentle nicker seemed to convey understanding, and Miguel left for the main stables with a heavy heart, constantly glancing back at his cottage, as if afraid it might disappear in his absence. The morning passed with excruciating slowness. Miguel went through his tasks mechanically, his mind never far from the shed where Thunder waited. He avoided conversation with the other workers, afraid that his secret might somehow be visible on his face or in his distracted manner. Fortunately, most attributed his withdrawal to continued grief over Thunder's sale, a topic that had dominated stable gossip since the horse's departure. At midday, Miguel hurried back to his cottage, a sandwich hastily wrapped in a napkin tucked into his pocket. He approached cautiously, alert for any sign that Thunder had been discovered in his absence. But all was quiet, the shed undisturbed. Inside, Thunder greeted him with a soft whicker, his ears forward, his eyes bright despite the confined space. Miguel spent his brief lunch break with Thunder, checking the bandage on his leg, offering the fresh apple he had smuggled from the kitchen, and whispering reassurances. "Just a few more hours," he promised. "Then we can figure out our next steps." Returning to work was even harder the second time, but Miguel forced himself to focus to appear normal. As he groomed one of Esteban's current racing prospects, a young filly with promise but none of Thunder's heart, a conversation between two senior stable hands caught his attention. "Martinez is offering a reward," one was saying, his voice low but clear in the quiet stable. "5,000 for information leading to the recovery of that thoroughbred he bought from Valmont." "5,000? The other whistled. "That's serious money. Horse must be valuable." "More than the money. I hear Martinez is furious. Says it makes him look incompetent, losing an animal like that. His men have been searching the countryside for days." Miguel's hands faltered momentarily in their grooming rhythm, but he forced himself to continue, to betray no reaction to this disturbing news. 5,000 was a fortune to most of the workers at Valmont. If anyone suspected Thunder was hidden on the estate, the temptation to claim that reward would be enormous. The urgency of their situation pressed down on Miguel with renewed force. They needed to leave, and soon. But how? Where could they go? Who could he trust with their secret? As Miguel finished his duties and prepared to return to his cottage for the evening, a voice called his name. He turned to find Anna, the estate cook's daughter, hurrying toward him. Anna had worked in the main house for years, and though they weren't close friends, she had always been kind to Miguel, sometimes slipping him extra food when Esteban cut rations during lean times. "Miguel, wait," she said, slightly breathless from her quick pace. "I need to talk to you." Miguel tensed, fear shooting through him. Had she seen something, noticed his suspicious behavior? Was she about to expose him? "What is it?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice casual. Anna glanced around, ensuring they were alone, then lowered her voice. "Is it true? Did Thunder come back to you?" Miguel felt the blood drain from his face. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, but his shock had already confirmed her suspicion. "I saw you last night," Anna admitted, "from my window. I couldn't sleep and I was looking out at the trees and I saw you with a horse. It looked like Thunder." Miguel's mind raced, calculating options, assessing the threat. Anna could ruin everything with a single word to the wrong person. But there was no malice in her expression, only concern and something else, a kind of tentative hope. "Are you going to tell anyone?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Anna shook her head firmly. "No, I never agreed with what Mr. Valmont did, selling Thunder to a man like Martinez. Everyone knows how he treats his animals." She hesitated, then added, And I know what Thunder means to you. I've seen you with him over the years." Relief weakened Miguel's knees, but caution kept him from fully embracing her apparent alliance. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need help," Anna said simply. "You can't keep a horse hidden in that tiny shed for long. Someone else will notice, someone who might not keep quiet about it." She was right, of course. Miguel had known it from the beginning, but hearing it stated so plainly brought the reality of their situation into sharp focus. "What do you suggest?" he asked, allowing himself to consider for the first time that he might not have to face this challenge alone. Anna glanced toward the main house, then back at Miguel. "My uncle has a farm about 50 miles north of here. It's small, nothing fancy, but he has space for another horse, and he has no love for men like Valmont and Martinez." Hope, fragile but persistent, bloomed in Miguel's chest. "Would he take us in? Both of us?" "He needs help with the farm," Anna nodded. "He's getting older, and his son moved to the city last year. He'd give you work, and Thunder could live out his days in peace." It sounded too perfect, almost like a trap. Miguel studied Anna's face, searching for any sign of deception, but found only sincerity and a quiet determination that matched his own. "Why would you help us?" he asked, needing to understand her motivation before he could fully trust her offer. Anna's expression softened. "Because I've watched you with Thunder all these years. I've seen how you care for him, how he responds to you. That kind of bond, it's rare. It deserves to be protected." She paused, then added more quietly, "And because I know what it's like to love something so much, you'd risk everything for it." There was a story behind those words, Miguel realized, a personal understanding that made Anna's offer more than just casual kindness. He didn't ask for details. They weren't relevant to the immediate decision he faced. "When could we leave?" he asked, committing himself to the path she offered. "Tomorrow night," Anna replied. "There's a delivery truck coming from my uncle's farm to pick up some furniture my mother is sending him. The driver is my cousin. He can take you and Thunder hidden in the back." Miguel nodded slowly, processing the plan. It was risky. If they were caught, he would certainly lose his job, might even face charges of theft. But staying was riskier still, with discovery becoming more likely each day and Martinez's men actively searching for Thunder. "Tomorrow night, then," he agreed. "And Anna, thank you." She smiled, a quick nervous gesture, then turned to go. "Be ready at midnight," she called over her shoulder. "And Miguel, pack light. The new life you're heading toward won't have much room for possessions." As Miguel watched her disappear toward the main house, he felt a curious mixture of fear and exhilaration. In 24 hours, he would either be on his way to a new life with Thunder or facing the consequences of a failed escape. Either way, there was no turning back now. The following day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Miguel went about his duties with mechanical precision, his mind constantly drifting to the night ahead. Each interaction with other staff members felt charged with potential danger. Was that a suspicious glance from the head groom? Did the housekeeper linger too long near his cottage during her afternoon walk? Had someone noticed the extra hay he'd quietly diverted to his shed? When evening finally arrived, Miguel returned to his cottage earlier than usual, claiming a headache. In the small shed, Thunder greeted him with a soft nicker, seemingly sensing the importance of the coming hours. Miguel checked the horse's foreleg, relieved to find the swelling had decreased significantly. Thunder would be able to walk to the rendezvous point, though Miguel worried about the strain of climbing into the delivery truck. "Just a few more hours, boy," Miguel whispered, stroking Thunder's neck. "Then we'll be on our way to somewhere safe." As darkness fell, Miguel packed his meager belongings, a few changes of clothes, his mother's old Bible, the small wooden horse Miguel's father had carved for him as a child, and his savings carefully rolled and tucked into a sock. Everything fit into a single backpack, a sobering reminder of how little he truly possessed after 7 years of work at the Valmont estate. From beneath his bed, Miguel retrieved an item he'd hidden away years ago, a halter made of soft leather, hand-stitched with Thunder's name. It had been a gift from his father before the old man passed, created in celebration of Thunder's first major victory. Esteban had deemed it too sentimental and unprofessional for regular use, insisting on plain functional equipment instead. Miguel had kept it anyway, a private treasure that connected him to both his father and Thunder. "Tonight you wear your true colors," Miguel said, slipping the halter onto Thunder's head, adjusting it with practiced hands. The horse seemed to stand taller with it on, as if recognizing its significance. At 11:30, Miguel led Thunder from the shed into the cool night air. They needed to reach the meeting point, an old service road behind the eastern pastures, by midnight. Moving quietly through the darkness, they kept to the shadows of trees and buildings, avoiding the well-lit main paths of the estate. Thunder followed Miguel with absolute trust, his hooves muffled by the soft grass. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust, the quarter moon providing just enough light to see by without illuminating them too clearly to watching eyes. The air was still, carrying sounds with treacherous clarity, forcing Miguel to pause frequently, listening for any sign of pursuit or discovery. They were halfway to the meeting point when disaster nearly struck. As they skirted the edge of the main paddock, a security guard Miguel hadn't expected rounded the corner of the equipment shed, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Miguel froze, one hand on Thunder's halter, breath caught in his throat. The guard paused, sweeping his light across the paddock, the beam missing them by mere feet as they stood motionless in the shadow of a large oak tree. For a heart-stopping moment, Miguel was certain they would be discovered. Then Thunder, displaying an intuitive understanding of the situation, lowered his head behind the tree trunk, further reducing their silhouette. The guard, seeing nothing unusual, continued his rounds, the sound of his footsteps gradually fading into the night. Miguel released his breath slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. "Good boy," he whispered, patting Thunder's neck. That was too close. They continued with even greater caution, taking a longer route that avoided the guard's patrol path. The delay cost them precious minutes, and Miguel began to worry they would miss their rendezvous. The consequences of such a failure weighed heavily on him. Anna's cousin wouldn't wait long, not with a vehicle that could easily be connected to their escape attempt. When they finally reached the service road, it was 5 minutes past midnight. Miguel scanned the area anxiously, looking for the delivery truck that was their ticket to freedom. The road was empty, stretching into darkness in both directions. Had they missed it? Had Anna's plan fallen through? Or worse, had it been a trap all along? Thunder sensed Miguel's anxiety, shifting restlessly beside him, ears flicking back and forth as he too surveyed their surroundings. Miguel stroked his neck, murmuring reassurances he didn't fully believe himself. "It's okay, boy. They'll come. They have to come." Another 5 minutes passed, each second stretching interminably. Miguel was about to admit defeat, to formulate a desperate alternative plan, when he heard it. The low rumble of an engine in the distance, approaching slowly with headlights off. The sound sent equal waves of relief and fear through him. This was it. Once they boarded that truck, there would be no turning back. The vehicle that emerged from the darkness was smaller than Miguel had expected. Not the large delivery truck he had envisioned, but a modest panel van with the logo of a local furniture company painted on its side. It rolled to a stop beside them, the engine cutting off with a soft sputter. The driver's door opened, and a young man slipped out, his movements quick and nervous. He was younger than Miguel had expected, perhaps no more than 20, with Anna's same dark eyes and determined expression. "You're Miguel?" he asked in a hushed voice. "I'm David, Anna's cousin." Miguel nodded, still holding Thunder's halter. Thank you for doing this. David glanced at Thunder, his eyes widening slightly. Anna didn't mention the horse was so big, I'm not sure if he'll fit, Miguel insisted, his voice taking on an edge of desperation. He has to. David hesitated, then nodded. We'll make it work. But we need to hurry. I told the gate guard I was just dropping off some paperwork and would be leaving immediately. If we take too long, he might get suspicious. He moved to the back of the van and opened the doors, revealing an interior that had been hastily prepared for their escape. The seats had been removed and a layer of straw covered the floor, providing some cushioning and absorption for the journey ahead. It wasn't ideal for transporting a horse, but it was their only option. Thunder approached the open doors cautiously, nostrils flaring as he caught the unfamiliar scents. The step up was high, too high for a horse with an injured leg to manage easily. Miguel looked around frantically, spotting a fallen log nearby. With David's help, he rolled it into position as a makeshift step. Come on, Thunder, Miguel urged, guiding the horse toward their improvised ramp. You can do this. Thunder hesitated, sensing the unnatural situation, his instincts warning against entering the confined space. Miguel moved to stand by his head, stroking his muzzle, looking directly into those intelligent eyes. Trust me, he whispered. One more challenge, and then we're free. Something in Miguel's voice, in the bond they shared, seemed to reach Thunder. The horse took a tentative step forward, then another, placing his forehooves carefully on the log. With a final surge of effort, he leapt into the van, his landing awkward but successful. Miguel quickly followed, positioning himself beside Thunder in the cramped space, one hand on the horse's neck to steady and comfort him. David closed the doors behind them, plunging them into near-total darkness, broken only by thin strips of moonlight filtering through the van's small windows. As the engine started and the van began to move, Miguel felt a strange mixture of terror and elation. They were leaving behind everything familiar, his job, his home, the only life he had known as an adult. Ahead lay uncertainty, risk, and the very real possibility of failure. But beside him stood Thunder, warm and solid in the darkness, a living reminder of why this journey was necessary, why this risk was worth taking. The van turned onto the main road, picking up speed as it headed away from the Valmont estate. With each mile that passed, Miguel felt the weight of fear lifting slightly, replaced by a growing sense of possibility. They weren't safe yet, far from it, but they had taken the first crucial step toward freedom. The journey through the night was a test of endurance for both Miguel and Thunder. The van, never designed to transport a horse, lurched and swayed with each turn and bump in the road. Miguel positioned himself as a buffer between Thunder and the vehicle's metal walls, his body absorbing impacts that might have injured the already battered horse. In the dim interior, he kept one hand constantly on Thunder's neck, murmuring reassurances whenever the horse showed signs of distress. David drove cautiously but steadily, taking back roads to avoid main highways, where a furniture van traveling at night might attract unwanted attention. The route was longer this way, transforming what should have been a 3-hour journey into an all-night ordeal. They stopped only twice, once to allow Thunder a brief respite from the confining space, carefully choosing a deserted stretch of road bordered by dense woodland that would conceal the unusual sight of a horse emerging from a delivery van, and once to refuel at a remote gas station where the sleepy attendant barely glanced at David before returning to his late-night television program. During one of these stops, David approached Miguel with a concerned expression. "We need to be more careful," he said, voice low, though there was no one to overhear them. "About 20 miles back, I noticed headlights following us. They turned off eventually, but I can't shake the feeling that we're being watched." Miguel's stomach tightened with fear. "Martinez's men?" David shrugged. "Could be, or just coincidence. But we should change our route just in case." The detour added another hour to their journey, taking them through winding country roads where the van's suspension was tested by potholes and uneven surfaces. Thunder bore it all with remarkable stoicism, though Miguel could feel the tension in the horse's muscles, the barely contained fear that threatened to transform into panic in the confines of the van. "We're almost there," Miguel promised as false dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. "Just a little longer." It was nearly 6 in the morning when David finally turned the van onto a narrow dirt track that led away from the paved road and into a stretch of rolling farmland. The property they approached was modest, perhaps 50 acres of mixed pasture and woodland, surrounding a weathered but well-maintained farmhouse and several outbuildings. A faded sign at the entrance read, "Willow Creek Farm," though no creek was immediately visible from the road. "This is it," David announced, relief evident in his voice as he navigated the final stretch of driveway. "My uncle's place." As they approached the main house, a figure emerged onto the porch, a tall, lean man with a weather-beaten face and salt and pepper hair. He watched their arrival with an unreadable expression, arms crossed over his chest. "That's Uncle Robert," David explained. "He's a man of few words, but he's got a good heart." Anna called ahead to explain the situation. The van came to a stop beside a small barn, its red paint faded to a soft rust color by years of sun and rain. David cut the engine, and in the sudden silence, Miguel could hear the early morning sounds of the farm, roosters crowing, cattle lowing in a distant pasture, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. "Let's get your horse out before the neighbors wake up," Robert said by way of greeting, approaching the back of the van. His voice was gruff but not unkind, his movements revealing the easy confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime working with animals. Opening the van's doors revealed Thunder standing remarkably steady despite the long, uncomfortable journey. The horse blinked in the morning light, nostrils flaring as he took in the new scents of the farm: hay, manure, the rich smell of tilled earth and growing things. With Robert's help, they constructed a makeshift ramp using boards from the barn, creating a gentler exit than the leap that had brought Thunder into the van. The horse descended cautiously, each step tentative as he tested his footing and his injured leg. When all 4 hooves were finally on solid ground, Thunder released a deep breath that seemed to express profound relief, his entire body relaxing as he stretched his cramped muscles. "He's a fine animal," Robert observed, his expert eye assessing Thunder's conformation despite the horse's bedraggled appearance. "Thoroughbred, right? Used to race?" Miguel nodded, still keeping one hand on Thunder's neck, reluctant to break physical contact after the stress of their journey. 17 victories. He was the pride of Valmont stables until he got old, Robert finished, a hint of bitterness in his tone. "Seen it too many times. These rich folks treat animals like machines to be used and discarded when they're no longer profitable." He gestured toward the barn. "Let's get him settled. I've prepared a stall with fresh bedding. After he's had water and some feed, I'll take a look at that leg." The barn was small but immaculately maintained, with 4 stalls, only one of which was currently occupied by an elderly dapple-gray mare who watched their entrance with mild interest. Thunder's assigned stall was spacious by any standard, with thick straw bedding, a water trough filled with clean water, and a generous portion of high-quality hay. As Miguel led Thunder into this new home, he felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to his eyes. After the cramped shed at his cottage, after the nightmare of Martinez's stables, after the confines of the van, this simple, clean stall represented a sanctuary neither of them had dared hope for. "Thank you," Miguel said, turning to Robert. "I don't know how I can repay you for this." The older man shrugged, uncomfortable with the emotional display. Anna explained the situation. "I've got no love for men like Valmont and Martinez. Besides, I need help around here. David tells me you're a hard worker, know your way around horses. Miguel nodded eagerly. "I'll work from dawn till dusk. Whatever you need." "We'll talk terms later," Robert said. "For now, get your horse settled and come up to the house. Martha's fixing breakfast and you look like you haven't eaten in days." After Robert and David left, Miguel spent a few quiet moments with Thunder, ensuring the horse had everything he needed. Thunder seemed to approve of his new accommodations, drinking deeply from the water trough and investigating the hay with interest. The tension of the journey was already beginning to fade from his posture, replaced by the cautious relaxation of an animal that senses safety after prolonged danger. "We made it," Miguel whispered, leaning his forehead against Thunder's neck. "I don't know what happens next, but we're together, and we're free." Thunder's response was a gentle nudge against Miguel's shoulder, a gesture that conveyed more than words ever could: trust, gratitude, and the unique bond they shared. As Miguel walked up to the farmhouse, he felt a curious lightness despite his exhaustion. Behind him lay everything familiar: his job, his accommodation, the security of a known routine. Ahead lay uncertainty, hard work, and the challenge of building a new life from nothing. Yet he found himself smiling as he climbed the porch steps, filled with a sense of rightness that transcended fear or doubt. Through the window, he could see a kitchen table set for breakfast, David and Robert already seated, a woman who must be Martha bringing a steaming platter to the table. It was a simple scene, ordinary in its domesticity, yet to Miguel it represented something profound: the possibility of belonging, of finding a place where both he and Thunder could live with dignity and purpose. With one last glance toward the barn where Thunder now rested, Miguel opened the door to step into his future. The seasons changed, summer giving way to autumn, autumn yielding to winter, and winter finally surrendering to the gentle persistence of spring. With each passing month, Willow Creek Farm became more like home to Miguel and Thunder. The routine they established held comfort in its predictability: early mornings in the barn, days filled with honest work, evenings spent in quiet companionship, as Miguel brushed Thunder's coat to a soft shine, sharing the events of the day in a low, steady voice. Thunder's injured leg healed completely under Robert's expert care, though a slight hitch in his gait remained, a permanent reminder of his desperate journey to freedom. It didn't impede him. In the spacious pastures of Willow Creek, he regained much of his former strength and spirit. On cool mornings, Miguel would sometimes look out the window of his small cabin, built by him and Robert during the winter months, to see Thunder racing across the meadow, mane and tail flying, moving for the sheer joy of movement rather than the demands of competition. Robert had proven to be a fair employer and, eventually, a friend. His gruff exterior concealed a depth of knowledge about horses that even Miguel, with his years at Valmont, found impressive. Under the older man's tutelage, Miguel expanded his skills, learning not just about caring for horses but about the entire workings of a small farm, repairing fences, maintaining equipment, planning crop rotations, and managing the modest herd of cattle that provided the farm's main income. Martha, Robert's wife, had welcomed Miguel with the same quiet warmth as her husband, incorporating him into their household with a naturalness that made him feel less like an employee and more like family. She never pressed for details about his past, accepting the vague story that he had left his previous position due to ethical disagreements with his employer. Her homemade bread and berry pies became a comfort Miguel hadn't realized he needed, a taste of the home he'd never truly had. But beneath the tranquility of their new life ran an undercurrent of caution. News reached them, carried by David on his monthly visits, that both Esteban Valmont and Ferdinand Martinez were still searching for the missing horse and stable hand. The reward for information had doubled, then tripled, becoming a sum that turned neighbor against neighbor in the communities surrounding both estates. "It's not about the money anymore," David explained during one such visit, his expression troubled. "It's about pride. Martinez can't stand that he was outsmarted, and Valmont is furious that someone took what he considered his property, even after he'd sold it. Miguel listened to these reports with a mixture of fear and grim satisfaction. The distance they had traveled, the remote location of Willow Creek Farm, and the discretion of Robert and his family offered some protection, but he knew that men like Valmont and Martinez had long memories and longer reaches. True safety would only come when they lost interest in the pursuit, when the insult to their pride faded enough to make the chase no longer worth the effort. In the meantime, Miguel took precautions. Thunder was never exercised where he could be seen from the main road. The distinctive leather halter with his name remained hidden away, a keepsake rather than equipment. When visitors came to the farm, rarely, given Robert's preference for solitude, Miguel made himself scarce working in distant fields or the back workshop. Thunder, too, seemed to understand the need for discretion, remaining in the shadowy depths of the barn when strangers' voices carried across the farmyard. One bright June morning, nearly a year after their escape, Miguel was repairing a section of fence in the north pasture when he saw a cloud of dust on the distant road, a vehicle approaching, moving too fast for the unpaved country lane. His heart rate quickened, his hand instinctively tightening on the hammer he held. Few people came to Willow Creek Farm, and fewer still arrived in a hurry. As the vehicle drew closer, Miguel recognized the battered pickup truck belonging to David. The young man's monthly visit wasn't due for another 2 weeks, and his unexpected appearance sent a spike of fear through Miguel. Had they been discovered? Was this a warning to flee? Miguel set down his tools and jogged toward the main house, arriving just as David pulled up in a spray of gravel. The expression on his face was not one of fear or urgency, however, but of barely contained excitement. "You won't believe it," David called, leaping from the truck before it had fully stopped. "It's over, Miguel. You're safe." Martha emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron, while Robert appeared from the direction of the equipment shed, his weathered face set in its customary stoic expression, but eyes alert with interest. "What's happened?" Miguel asked, almost afraid to hope. David grinned widely. "Martinez is ruined. There was a federal investigation into his business practices, tax evasion, illegal imports, labor violations. They seized everything, including all his horses. It's been all over the news for days." "And Valmont?" Miguel pressed, knowing that one enemy neutralized did not mean complete safety. "That's the best part," David continued. "When the feds started looking into Martinez's associates, Valmont's name came up. Nothing concrete yet, but there are rumors of an investigation there too. He's keeping a very low profile, trying to distance himself from Martinez. The last thing he cares about now is a missing horse and stable hand." The news washed over Miguel like a cool breeze on a hot day, bringing relief so profound it made his knees weak. Robert, ever practical, invited everyone inside to discuss the development over Martha's fresh lemonade. But Miguel found himself heading toward the barn instead, needing to share this moment with Thunder first. He found the horse dozing in the shade of his stall, one hind leg cocked in relaxation, ears twitching occasionally at the sounds of barn swallows nesting in the rafters. At Miguel's approach, Thunder raised his head, instantly alert, nickering softly in greeting. "It's over, boy," Miguel said, his voice thick with emotion as he stroked the soft muzzle. "We don't have to hide anymore. We're truly free." Whether Thunder understood the words was impossible to know, but he seemed to sense the shift in Miguel's demeanor, the release of a tension that had been present since their arrival at Willow Creek. He nudged Miguel's chest gently, as he had done countless times over the years, a gesture that had come to represent their unspoken bond. Later that evening, after the excitement had settled and David had departed with promises to return soon with more news, Miguel sat on the porch of his small cabin watching Thunder graze in the golden light of sunset. Robert approached, 2 glasses and a bottle of his homemade apple brandy in hand. "Thought this might be a good occasion to break this out," the older man said, pouring a measure into each glass before taking a seat in the adjacent rocking chair. They sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping the fiery liquor, watching as thunder moved gracefully across the pasture, pausing occasionally to look in their direction as if checking that Miguel was still there. "You know," Robert finally said, "when Anna first called about you and that horse, I wasn't sure what to think. Taking in a stable hand and a stolen thoroughbred seemed like asking for trouble." He took another sip of brandy. "But I've always been a fair judge of character, both human and equine. Knew within a week I'd made the right decision." Miguel nodded, touched by the rare moment of openness from his usually taciturn employer. "I can never repay you for what you've done for us." Robert waved away the sentiment. "Farm's running better than it has in years with your help, and I've come to think that maybe it wasn't just you and Thunder that needed saving." He gestured toward the expanse of Willow Creek Farm, the fields they had planted together, the renovated barn, the new fencing. "This place was dying a slow death before you came. Martha and I were just going through the motions, doing enough to get by, but not much more. You brought something back to it. To us." The simple admission, coming from a man so sparing with words, moved Miguel deeply. He had been so focused on what he and Thunder had gained, safety, peace, a place to belong, that he hadn't fully considered what they might have given in return. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared overhead, Miguel reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. Thunder's sale, his mistreatment at Martinez's hands, his impossible escape and return to Miguel, all links in a chain that had led not to disaster, as it had so often threatened to do, but to this quiet evening on a peaceful farm where both man and horse had found not just sanctuary but purpose. In the pasture, Thunder raised his head, silhouetted against the deepening blue of the night sky, his form as majestic as it had been in his racing days, perhaps more so for the dignity with which he had endured suffering and emerged unbroken. He was no longer anyone's property, no longer a commodity to be bought and sold, used and discarded. He was simply Thunder, a horse who had defied all odds to find his way home to the one person who valued him, not for what he could do, but for who he was. And that, Miguel thought, as he raised his glass in a silent toast to his four-legged friend, was a victory greater than any race either of them had ever won.